Okay, history fans, you'll recall that last week you took a quiz where you were to organize 10 events, 10 significant events of World War II in their chronological order. And then you had another quiz where you took another 10 events and did the same thing. Well, I'm going to go over those first 10 events with you and briefly share with you their importance. Now, first is September 18, 1931, and this is a Japanese invasion of Manchuria. Now, the Japanese have imperial ambitions, but the Japanese islands have limited material resources. So, to keep those ambitions a reality, to feed that war machine, they need to have other people's resources, other people's territory. So, they set up an excuse for the invasion of China. A small section of Japanese railroad was blown up by Japanese soldiers, and that was considered a provocation by the Chinese. So the Japanese invaded Manchuria and took it over, setting up a carving out a new republic, really a puppet government called Manchukuo. And then, and by the way, some scholars would like to start the Second World War there, even though this is several years before anything significant concerning the war happens in Europe. Now, December 13, 1937, is the Japanese assault on the Chinese city of Nanking. This is sometimes called the Rape of Nanking, and this is where the Japanese are given the three alls: loot all, kill all, burn all. And there were Japanese soldiers that were competing with each other in how many Chinese civilians they could kill. Rape took place on a colossal scale, and the number of Chinese civilians that were murdered um, by Japanese soldiers is simply not known. It's only known in estimates right now. The actual number is not known. And to this day, the Japanese have not fully apologized for what happened in Nanking. And this, to this day, is still a source of tension between the two countries. September 30, 1938, is the Czech crisis. And so we go to Munich, Germany, where Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain meets with Adolf Hitler, and they agree to give Hitler that critically important strategic location, that mountainous terrain called the Sudetenland on the western end of Czechoslovakia. And, uh, and once Hitler has that, he has an easy time taking over the rest of Czechoslovakia, and that gets him the southern border of Poland. So Hitler is not just casting about looking for places to invade. There's a bigger plan in mind that uh, one conquest should hopefully set up for another. Then the big event occurs September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland and the Soviets invade Poland from the other side. But what happens then is Britain is now realizing they're beginning to catch up with Winston Churchill that appeasing Hitler was a colossal error. And now they are beginning to realize that. And Neville Chamberlain gives the Germans an ultimatum: leave by September 3rd, or we will declare war. And that brings us to our next date, September 3rd. And that's September 3rd, 1939, when the British government does declare war on Germany. And so some look at this event as the beginning of World War II. It certainly is concerning the war in Europe. We can start that with the invasion of Poland. Um, September 3rd, I'm sorry, May 10, 1940, Germany invades France. Now, young German officers after World War I had begun to appreciate the new military technology that World War One brought into being: airplanes, tanks, and good old-fashioned infantry. And so it was German officers who first came up with a way of combining all of these things effectively to bring about a short and rapid conquest of large amounts of territory. It was called Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. It worked marvelously well in Poland, and it worked shockingly well in France. As I said earlier, remember that in World War One, Germany strove for 4 years in trench warfare to take over France and failed. With this new blitzkrieg tactic, they had all of France in 6 weeks, and they had the British Expeditionary Force on the run and trapped at the French city of Dunkirk. Now, next up after France falls, next on Hitler's checklist is Britain. And it's kind of hard to pick a start date or an end date for the Battle of Britain, but for our purposes, we will pick July 10, 1940 as the starting of the Battle of Britain. And this is important because the Blitzkrieg doesn't work here. There is a gigantic moat 20 miles wide between France and Britain. And so England has this natural protection of the English Channel. So the Germans have to revise their plans, and their goal is to get air superiority over the English Channel and launch Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. And for a number of reasons, the Germans never obtained that supremacy over the Channel, and so Operation Sea Lion is never launched, and Germany suffers its first military defeat at the hands of the British. Now, that brings us to September 22nd, 1940. We're going to leave Britain. We're going to go almost to the other side of the world, or at least a few time zones over, and we are in French Indochina. But you don't know it as French Indochina. You probably know it as Vietnam, as we would have our experience there. But the Japanese invade French Indochina on September 22nd, 1940. And again, it is to obtain raw materials for their war machine. And so we respond to that. In August 1st, 1941, we respond by putting an embargo on the Japanese. Now, interestingly, 80% of Japanese oil came from the United States, so that was huge. And our embargo, it was absolutely crippling to the Japanese. And so the Japanese decide that rather than buckle and be humiliated, they will attack. And so that brings us to December 7, 1941, which is that fateful day of infamy in which the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and brought us into the Second World War. And this time, America will begin the Second World War as one of the leading military industrial powers on the planet. America will end World War II as the undisputed leading military and industrial power on the planet for a time. And so that brings us up to the events 1931 to 1941, fairly quickly covered, but I hope you got a little of their importance. More to come. See you later.